Chanting the holy name of Krishna is the essence of all forms of religion. Nadia Godrume Nityananda Mahajan. भाई मांगिए भिक्षा बोलो कृष्ण भजो कृष्ण करो कृष्ण शिक्षा बोलो कृष्ण भजो कृष्ण करो कृष्ण शिक्षा अपराध शून्य होए लोहे कृष्ण नाम अपराध शून्य होए लोहे कृष्ण नाम कृष्ण माता कृष्ण पिता कृष्ण धन प्राण कृष्ण माता कृष्ण पिता कृष्ण धन प्राण कृष्ण ने संसार करि चारि अनाचार कृष्ण ने संसार करो चारि अनाचार दोए कृष्ण नाम सर्वधर्म सार जीव दोया कृष्ण नाम सर्वधर्म सार नदिया गोद में नित्यानंद महाजान हरिया गोद में नित्यानंद नादिया गोद्र में नित्यानंद महाजान पति आछे नाम हट जीवेर कर श्रद्धावान जन है श्रद्धावान जन है श्रद्धावान जाना है श्रद्धावान जाना है श्रद्धावान जाना है श्रद्धावान जाना है हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण
Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Hare Krishna Viष्णुपाद परमहंस जगचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यमद ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस जगचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत शिष्यमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर श्रील प्रभुपाद की आनंद कोटि वैष्णव ने की नाम श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की समवेत भक्तवृंद की अवगुण से सिमरन हरे कृष्ण अवगुण से सिमरन हरे कृष्ण अवगुण से सिमरन हरे कृष्ण अवगुण श्री गुरु गौरांग अवगुण श्री श्रील प्रभुपाद नमो विष्णुपाद कृष्ण पृष्ठपद श्रीमते भक्ति विकास स्वामी Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Pravacha Mahyam Saha Dayaluhu Uktah Munihi Pulastena Puranmadhyam Saham Tava Etat Kathayami Vatsa Shraddhalave Nityam Anuvartaya Pravacha Mahyam Sadayalur Ukto Muni Pulastena Purana Madhyam Soham Tavitat Katyami Vatsa Shraddhalave Nityam Anuvartaya Pravacha Mahyam Sadayalur Ukto Muni Pulastena Purana Madhyam Soham Tavitat Katyami Vatsa Shraddhalave Nityam Anuvartaya Pravacha Mahyam Sadayalurukto Muni Pulastena Purana Madhyam Soham Tavitat Katyami Vatsa Shraddhalave Nityam Anuvrataya. Please read. Anyone? Mataji. You did 7 yesterday, right?
6, I think, the one with Sankirtan.
Yeah. What is in mine? Yeah, so, sorry, we're meant to do 7, but 8 has the purport. So let me quickly, I'll just recite 8. Which is Sankhayana. Yeah, you didn't do this one yesterday, did you? No. This was the next one, okay. Let me quickly do this one and then we'll continue to Sankhyanaya Paramahangsa Mukhya Vishvamukha Vivakshamanaya Bhagavat Vibhutihi Jagad Swasmad Gurave Nivitaya Parasharathat Brahaspatescha. Translation: The great sage Sankhyayana was a chief amongst the transcendentalists, and when he was describing the glory of the Lord in the terms of Srimad Bhagavatam, it so happened that my spiritual master Parashara and Brahaspati both heard him. Okay, synonyms here. Pravacha said, Mahyam unto me, Saha he, Dayaluhu, kind-hearted, Uktaha, aforementioned, Munihi, sage, Pulastena, by the sage Pulastya, Puranamadhyam, the foremost of all the Puranas. Saham, that also I, Tava, unto you, Etat, this, Katyami, shall speak, Vatsa, my dear son, Shraddhalave, unto one who is faithful, Nityam, always, Anuvrataya, unto one who is a follower. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: The great sage Parashara, as aforementioned, being so advised by the great sage Pulastya, spoke unto me the foremost of the Puranas, Bhagavatam. I shall also describe this before you, my dear son, in terms of my hearing, because you are always my faithful follower. Purport: The great sage of the name Pulastya is the father of all demoniac descendants. Once upon a time, Parashara began a sacrifice in which all the demons were to be burnt to death because his father had been killed and devoured by one of them. The great sage Vasishtha Muni arrived at the sacrifice and requested Parashara to stop the deadly action, and because of Vasishtha's position and respect in the community of sages, Parashara could not deny the request. Parashara, having stopped the sacrifice, Pulastya, the father of the demons, appreciated his Brahminical temperament and gave the blessings that in the future he would be a great speaker on the Vedic literatures called the Puranas, the supplement of the Vedas. Parashara's action was appreciated by Pulastya because Parashara had forgiven the demons out of his Brahminical power of forgiveness. Parashara was able to demolish all the sub-demons in the sacrifice, but he considered demons are so made that they devour living creatures, men and animals. But why on that account should I withdraw my Brahminical qualification of forgiveness? As the great speaker of Puranas, Parashara first of all spoke on the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavata Purana, because it is the foremost of all the Puranas. Maitreya Muni desired to narrate the same Bhagavatam had heard from Parashara, and Vidura was qualified to hear because of his faithfulness and his following the instructions received from the superiors. So Srimad Bhagavatam was being narrated from time immemorial by the disciplic succession, even before the time of Vyasadeva. The so-called historians calculate the Puranas to be only a few hundred years old, but factually the Puranas existed from the time immemorial Because before all historic calculations by the mundanes and speculative philosophers, Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Tamena Tasmai Shri Guru Shri Chaitanya Manavishtam Stapitamena Bhuttali Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yatapatakam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagritam Sagaran Ragnatham Vitam Tum Sijivam Sadvitam Sabdadam Parijan Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Saganavita Shri Vishakan Vitamsha He Krishna Karunasana Dinam Jagatpati Gopi Gopi Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavani Devi Pranamami Haripe Vancha Kalpatarvesha Kripa Sindhubhya Vachapatanam Pavanibhya Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashta Badal Shrimate Bhakti Vikasa Swami Nityananda Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashta Badal Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharni Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Deshataranya Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jnananandamayiv Devam Nilam Patikakritim Adaram Sarva Vidyanam Hai Kripam Pusmahe Guru Vaishnava Bhagavanti Nirsmaram Hai Vigna Vinashana Shahini Chivanchita Purana. So, here today, discussing a few points throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam. Here where there's this narration being taken place here that of how this Bhagavatam was spoken here to Vidura, particularly through Parashara, in which Parashara was performing sacrifices and was requested by Vasishta not to do so. And the adherence of Vasishta's, how he complied how Parashara complied with Vasishta, he was able to attain the position in which he could describe all of the Puranas. So he attained such a great position. Now in this particular purport here, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes on the platform of the qualifications of a Brahmana and how a Brahmana acts in his life, and also the qualification of a proper person to receive knowledge, and also the confirmation of how old these Vedas actually are, or the Puranas are. So Srila Prabhupada specifically hits on some of these points, all related to each other, obviously, as some things are in Krishna consciousness. Specifically being the point here that the Vedic literatures are time immemorial, as Krishna himself speaks about in the Bhagavad Gita. Sa eva mayati dhya yoga prokta puratana bhaktosi me sakachati rahasyam ye idad uttamam. That puratana, Srila Prabhupada speaks on this a lot, puratana, that it is very old, that it has been spoken before. It is actually there since time immemorial, as Krishna relates in the Bhagavad Gita, that I've seen so many, people come in and out of this world, neither do you cease to exist, neither do I. But the difference is that I can remember them all, you can't, O Arjuna. So Krishna relates to Arjuna how that he's related the science even to the sun god, and that he's reestablishing it again in order for the benefit of humankind, in order to establish that yoga back again, yoga nashta parantapa, it has become lost in time, so to reestablish that. So we have many scholars within the modern times in which they pretty much believe that the Puranas were composed, this is Britannica, which is ironic that the British would, Britannica is the website of the British. They say that, the Puranas were written about 150 and 170 CE. I don't know, what does CE stand for? After Christ? C is after Christ? C is after Christ? Yeah. Okay, so after Christ, 350 years after Christ. But then we have accounts in which we have great sages and lines of sages that go back, hundreds of thousands of years. There's gotras that are established in which they come from great munis and sages that were there in the ancient times, as you would say. So the modern society tries to diminish or discredit the Vedic culture to a great extent. Actually, they can't even understand how such complex language was possible in such a time in which we can't even understand it now, and we're meant to be more advanced in modern civilization. But Sanskrit is such a complex language. Well, if we're all, primitive and, like, jungle people, what is that particular word? Huh? Cavemen and all of this, how did such a complex language exist in which deep philosophy was discussed, in which you don't see it in any other part of the world. Such a complicated philosophy, Sankhya philosophy is there, and even just the philosophy of the Bhagavatam, all of these things describing the different nature of the universe to its, to in reality, not in some hocus pocus way. How was such philosophy discussed? Because we look at the Bible and basically there's no philosophy there, and that's considered to be like, they're considering it to be around the same time. But anyways, we have our own knowledge which tells us or gives us the understanding that it is actually very old. It is actually, the Vedas are eternal. There never is a time where the Vedas do not exist, because they are propagated by the Supreme Personality God Himself. He is the maintainer of the Vedas. He is the creator of the Vedas. And that is that is important point, because if there's a time in which the Vedas didn't exist, without, if there was a time when Vedas didn't exist, it would, well, what's the purpose of the creation? Because the purpose of creation specifically is to help the jiva reform. Then what is going to be the reformation of the jiva, and which knowledge does he get to be able to undergo that reformation? So the Vedas were always present. As Srila Prabhupada says here, the so-called historians calculate the Puranas to be only a few hundred years old, but factually, the Puranas existed from time immemorial, before all historical calculations by the mundaners and speculative philosophers. So one cannot actually even calculate, because the Vedas, in one sense, they're beyond time also, because they don't end with the creation and destructions of this material world. They're available eternally, because they're coming from the mouth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who Himself is eternal. They may take the position of becoming unmanifest and manifest in this world, as we see a lot of the Puranas and a lot of the Vedic literatures, Samaveda, Yajurveda, Rig Veda, and Atharva Veda, they have been lost to a great extent. Brahma Samhita, we only have one chapter basically of it. So to a great extent in this Kali Yuga, they have become unmanifested because of the nature of this age. As the discussion of Brahminical standard is also being discussed here, that was largely degraded. The Brahminical society was practically completely destroyed in so many different ways, by the Mughals in some ways, and then we've had the British who came and destroyed that in a whole, completely different way through education, and then we've got Bollywood that's completely just demolished that to nothing basically now. And so with the you could say revolutionization or a complete change of the educational culture, all of the practices of the Vedas in one sense, and also the knowledge of the Vedas were largely lost. Nobody had to maintain them at all. There would be the Chaturvedis who would know the 4 Vedas, but then they had no one to pass it down to, because their children were becoming, working jobs for, so many people, which a Brahmana generally doesn't take. They started going under this modern education, and then they started thinking, well, actually, our own culture is, low class, and so we don't need to study it, we just need to make money. We can work for these beef eaters and drunkards and work for their factories and propagate that, as we see going on now. So largely the intelligence of a Brahmana became misused in such a great extent, and when it is misused, the strength of a Brahmana lies in his ability to perform sacrifices, to be able to follow those principles. That gives him more strength, more intelligence, but because they're not practicing those Brahminical principles, you see their character degrade, their ability to perform sacrifice becomes practically nil, just like you're saying yesterday that we were talking and he said, I'm from a Brahmin family, but for them there's no question of sacrifice. It's like it's a giving to the sadhu is a sacrifice, it's charity. Purchasing the Bhagavatam, doing all of these things are part of sacrifice, but they can't perform those sacrifices because they've lost the ability to do so, they've lost the piety to do so to some extent. So what to speak of memorizing the Vedas, what to speak of actually propagating the Vedas, as we see here, the qualification of Parashara. He's such a great Brahmana, he can kill all of the demons at once by his sacrifice. But he has that qualification to be able to perform that sacrifice. At the same time, because he's a Brahmana, he has the quality of forgiveness. And he's able to completely control his samadhamma tapasaucham. He's able to completely control his senses, even though, just like, an ordinary man, if he's angered to such an extent, his father has been killed. I think so, is that right? Because that's why he started this sacrifice, began his sacrifice. His father has been killed or devoured by one of them. So he's angered, but a Brahmana knows how to control even that anger. An ordinary man will be completely carried away by such a thing, and as Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, from lust, anger arises, and then from anger there's a fall down that happens, and one falls back into the material pool. But you can see the qualification of a Brahmana is not like that. Anger doesn't affect him. In one sense, although he's angry at this, he's trying to pacify his, he's trying to get revenge on them in that sense. But at the same time, he's not completely hung up on that. When he's requested to stop, he goes immediately, why should I do this? Okay, what's the point? I've been requested to stop. I shall exercise my quality of a Brahmana, forgiveness. So Brahmana is self-controlled. He's controlled in the mind, he's controlled in his senses, he's austere. So that quality, with the degradation of the educational system of the Vedic culture, that quality of Brahminical standard was also gone, because without education, how can you practice what you don't know? And some may do so without knowledge also because of their piety. Some people you meet sometimes, they never drink in their life, they never smoke in their life, they've never had illicit sex, they're religious. Even in this age, you'll meet people like that. Even at UGA, sometimes we meet young boys that are from, high, Brahminical families. And you meet them and they go, no, I never did any of those things. I was always around it and my friends do it, but I never did it. Because that culture is still there, that level of piety is still there, that level of self-control is still there. So that self-control is particularly meant to be utilized in study of the Vedas. That's what the purpose of that is, because one is meant to study the Vedas and practice it, and go back home back to God and understanding devotional service to be the essence of the Vedas. But with the loss of that, and then with, as Srila Prabhupada says here, that by the historical calculations by mundane and speculative philosophers, then they give so many different ideas to when the Puranas came about, when the Vedas came about, when you have a clear line of teachers going back all the way to Krishna, in which is established thousands of years. We have the Alvars, and then we have all of the whole Ramanuja line, thousands of years of knowledge here, that they're all pointing towards, okay, we're studying under this Purana, this Bhagavad Gita, and this is when established. And we have astrologers who have the ability to calculate at what time certain things were spoken and what was done. So there's a whole system of Vedic knowledge and culture in which it establishes the existence of the Vedas and how they're time immemorial. But Srila Prabhupada said, but the mundane and speculative philosophers, they're not able to understand. They're not able to calculate. It's too much for their mundane senses and their mind to understand the transcendental nature of these Vedas. So it can be bewildering sometimes. Sometimes because we take advice, we're used to taking advice of the historians and all of these things, and they say, well, it's only this old. And then sometimes you get Christians coming up and saying, well, your Vedas are only this old. But we have clear now, Prabhu, I forget his name, but the favorite in archaeology, Chandan-Acarya Prabhu does a lot of research on this, looking at different texts and also looking at the history of India. There's a nice book written by Devamrita Maharaj called The Hidden Histories of India, I believe. So a lot of it has been downplayed, and a lot of it has been kind of not surfaced or been given proper regard because of the nature of the culture that is influenced in the way that Western culture thinks about things and the way it looks at it. So the Vedic realm has taken a little bit of a backseat due to that. And different devotees like Chandan-Acarya Prabhu have tried to bring that to light, but they're pretty adamant on not accepting that. So that is the nature of this culture, as it is being spoken here also, that in order to actually even receive that knowledge or even understand the culture or accept the Vedas itself, it requires a proper attitude and mood. The general attitude and mood of the Western culture, in the whole Western philosophy and culture, is that generally of a little bit of, you could say in one sense, well, at least scientific culture, is there faithlessness and very proud culture. Level of faithlessness is there, everything is questioned. Like, for example, we accept Veda as axiomatic truth. And as Srila Prabhupada relates in the Ishopanishad, if Veda says it, then I accept it. There's no question. Because why? Because there's a underlying principle that's there in which one accepts that the Vedas are coming from the Supreme Personality Godhead and they're in total truth. So whatever the Veda says, I follow. And generally the standard of Vedic society is of humility, that one approaches a system of knowledge in humility, but we see completely opposite, and we're trained in a completely opposite way from our days of education. That it's actually of proud. If I attain some knowledge, I'm some great personality of this world, or I'm intelligent, I can acquire everything, I can do everything. But here particularly related that Maitreya was very faithful, was qualified to hear because of his faithfulness and his following the instructions received from his superiors. So here Srila Prabhupada particularly relates that is the qualification of a hearer of the Srimad Bhagavatam, as I think we also talking two verses before, and Sri Kumar Prabhu was relating the purport of Srila Prabhupada says that is the primary way of devotional service, hearing and chanting. So that one has to get proper qualification, and that particular qualification is humility and faith. That one cannot be proud in hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. One has to approach the whole thing with proper humility, as we have. How does that verse start in 434, is it? Tad vidhi pranipadena pariprashna seva upadekshinte te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshana. And Srila Prabhupada says many important things in that purport. Here that, let me see, that the Bhagavad Gita says, Dharman tu sakshat bhagavad pranitam. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help one lead to the right path. No independent study of books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. One has to approach with bona fide spiritual masters to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master must be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve that spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiry and submission constitute the proper combination of spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from the learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must pass the test of the spiritual master, and when he sees the genuine desire of the disciples, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. Not only should one hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one should also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. So, very important points. That one's inquiries is that quality of submissiveness, but at the same time, blind faith is not blind following is not encouraged. And neither is absurd inquiries, not that you ask all sorts of stupid, dumb questions, as we get sometimes. What about the aliens? What about this? Like, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Why can't we go explore the planets and do all of this? What does that have to do anything with your life? We can make so much advancement and go to another planet and discover another life. You think you'll be able to do that? It's like, you'll be dead in a couple of years. So make proper inquiries about the soul. Make proper inquiries about the path of the devotional service of the Lord, in which it should relate to one's life, not that one asks all dumb questions about all things that have nothing to do with, what difference it makes in your life. That's one thing that when I came into devotional service, there was some, certain things that were controversial within scientific understanding of the Vedas and compared with the modern science understanding. And I was like, okay, you look at that, and sometimes there's contradictions. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, well, what the hell does it have to do with me, whether we go to the moon or not? That was a big one. Srila Prabhupada said, we didn't go to the moon, and being from a science, it's like, well, what do you mean they didn't go to the moon? It's like this picture is like there's like a spaceship that goes up there. And it's just accepted. Okay, Srila Prabhupada, okay, it's like Srila Prabhupada says that they didn't go. But factually, what the hell difference does it make to my life? Better, yasya devi para bhakti yata devi tato guru. Better I just accept what Srila Prabhupada said and be revealed the spirit, knowledge of the Vedas than to reject it, being proud, and then be deprived of all of the knowledge of the Vedas. So it takes that quality, because actually sometimes Krishna sets up such a system in order to test the faith of the disciple also. Do you actually believe what the spiritual master says? Do you actually take upon the words of the spiritual master seriously? As Krishna relates in himself, saying that, well, I'm the Acharya. Acharya mam vijaniyam. Navamanyati karichit. Well, will you accept him as me? Will you accept the words that the Acharya speaks as truth, even though sometimes seemingly contradictory to this world? So the level of faith that is required in one's Acharya, in one's spiritual master, in Krishna, is quite high actually, and that can get tested at many times. Our level of faith can get tested. But the position of the disciple is to submissively inquire, even though that faith may get tested, not that he becomes blind to it and just kind of, oh yeah, okay, just let me believe. But he clears that up, and certain things sometimes can't be cleared up. So then he's patient with it also. So it's just like I had that dilemma in my life at that point, and I was like, well, Srila Prabhupada is saying a lot of wild things, like, well, the gravity, they don't know anything about gravity, and gravity is actually, it's different controversial statements, according to the science. And I was like, well, I don't know if I can accept that. But later, as I accepted that, then there was definitely, like as the Vedas speak of, that different things are revealed to you within your heart, in which that so-called doubt becomes insignificant. Actually, that doubt becomes well, that's not a doubt anymore, because there's more conviction of the nature of absolute truth than the nature of this material world. Because if you actually analyze it, this faith in this material world is so stupid, because there's so many more contradictions within their own science than there is even within devotional service. So even if you analyze it, you go, okay, Srila Prabhupada said this one thing about the moon thing, so how am I meant to understand that? Well, how are you meant to understand that the atheists believe that we're all chemicals, and the same scientists that propagate that don't believe that you have consciousness, don't believe in the soul, don't believe in karma. So you have to reject it. You have to reject everything. Well, they have much more contradictions. They can't understand things to a greater extent. So better to accept someone who understands more in a logical way, if you want to approach this in a logical sense. So by proper submission and inquiry, one can get the knowledge within the heart, by which that revelation within the heart, you could say, well, that can take many different connotations because of the nature that that Christian religion kind of has to it. But we understand that by approaching the Supreme Personality Godhead and His devotees in a submissive spirit, that of attitude of service, then one gets the proper knowledge. And you can see when you approach, when we've seen people who approach in an unsubmissive spirit and that of proudness, not of service, being proud, wanting to be served, then they do not get the knowledge. And then the same knowledge that will convince someone will actually deter someone away. It's interesting sometimes. The same answer, you may get the same answer, somebody will leave and somebody else will stay. Why is that? Why is that? Because the level of sincerity someone had in actually just even inquiring about that. They weren't coming from a platform of false ego, but they were coming from a platform of actually proper service attitude, submission. So they were able to be granted that within their hearts. It is a qualification of faith, ultimately also. Shraddhavan janehe bhakti adhikar. That one has to have faith in the process, one has to have faith in the sadhu. And that's how the whole process of devotional service even starts, by faith. Faith is you could say, is the be-all and end-all in one sense, because to the level of faith you have, that is the level of advancement that you make in devotional service. Sometimes we do say, well, Krishna consciousness in one sense is also independent faith, or blind faith, that you don't have to believe it for it to work. It will take place, whether you believe it or not, if you just perform the process. So people come in with this very arrogant attitude of that I am such a great philosopher and I need to be served, as Srila Prabhupada often fought back with. As like, you answer my question first. Like, no, I am not your, what did he say exactly? I'm not your dog. I'm not, huh? Yeah, I'm not your servant. I'm Krishna's servant. I don't have to, do what you say. Forget you. So Srila Prabhupada sometimes recognized such a thing and wouldn't give that, proper. I guess you could say, Srila Prabhupada would make it a point to point out that fault within that person. That even if I explain it to give you the proper answer, you won't get it. Just because of your whole mood and attitude of actually coming to the inquiry of Krishna consciousness. So, this word is used here that, where is it here? Sorry. In this verse, this word is used, Shraddha, that unto one who is faithful. The spiritual master becomes pleased by that person who is faithful in his service, in his attitude, in his devotion service, and he grants him that. Why is it that some devotees make very fast advancement in Krishna consciousness? Because the level of faith in the spiritual master. You see that. Some devotees are able to do extraordinary work, like Srila Prabhupada's disciples were able to do extraordinary things. I couldn't imagine, when you read Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhav, in that there's a section called Preaching to Westerners. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes that in time, this will take, because Ban Maharaj and a few others have gone to London, and they're preaching there, and they've established some sort of little center, and they're starting to do something, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes, this will take almost a century to fructify. And I think this is might have been in the 1920s or something like that, along those lines, because it would have been just after. Because Srila Prabhupada was actually involved within that. When they arrived back, there's a picture of Srila Prabhupada with those devotees that came back from London and all of that. So most likely it took place at the late, 1910s or the 20s. Early 30s could be also. So he relates in that it will take centuries to do so. But then Srila Prabhupada coming to the West, you could say almost, 20, 30 years later, 40 years later, Srila Prabhupada came and his disciples had such deep level of faith. Srila Prabhupada himself had such deep level of faith in just the instructions of his own spiritual master. He didn't believe that he would actually be able to come here and do anything significant himself. He writes like that, well, I'm sure, what am I meant to do? How will they'll tell me, old man, it's like, go home, it's like, you can't eat meat, illicit sex, no drugs, no gambling. Old man, go home, what are you doing here? And you can imagine that also, you're coming to the society of just hippies who are just having sex left, right, and center, full of taking so many drugs and so many different, meat and all of these things are going on. But the level of faith Srila Prabhupada had, that was directly shown, and then that was also inculcated within his disciples, in which they took that and they saw, Srila Prabhupada is able to do it, we can do it too. We just have to have faith in Srila Prabhupada, and then they went and spread Krishna consciousness like wildfire in London, in which previously disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur were having great trouble doing. So the level of faith a disciple has in his spiritual master, it actually can conquer many difficult situations within the material world. Establishing Krishna consciousness in one's own devotional service, in many different ways, impacting the lives of others. Actually, people mostly in Krishna consciousness, they become convinced by the level of faith a devotee has, another devotee has. It's as Srila Prabhupada says, I have given that faith, or I have given that piety by which you can get faith. So similarly, the display of a devotee's faith in the service of the spiritual master, it inspires others to develop faith. Actually, the faith is very contagious, and that's actually, how can we analyze that? Well, you look at the Christians. Oh, they have strong faith. Their faith is practically unshakable. But if you actually look at their knowledge, it's freaking useless. is worse than useless. It's like, what do you guys have faith in? What is your faith in? And actually, this is like, what do you have? Like I often say, what do you have faith in? You don't know anything. You don't know who God is. You don't know what happens after death. You don't know what's happening right now. You don't know what happened before birth. So what do you have faith in? Well, their faith comes from the level of faith of others. You could say in one sense also Jesus displayed that faith in God. And so similarly, others acquire their faith from other Christians, and they're only strong, their faith is only strong as long as they're together, actually. And that's one of my things that I do on campus. It's a little cunning, but I ask people what shakes their faith to figure out what shakes their faith, so then to try to do that. It sounds pretty messed up, but I'm trying to give them Krishna consciousness. So I said, what shakes your faith? Different people have different answers, but ultimately we understand also from Bhagavad Gita that association is what's going to shake faith. Even within devotional service, you start associating with the karmis, you become a karmi. You start associating with saintly devotees, pure devotees, you probably become a pure devotee. So it plays a huge role in our life, the level of faith that we have, and especially in our own devotional service and the devotional service of others. For like all devotees will say who came into Krishna consciousness, we joined mainly because of personalities, actually. I joined because I was convinced by the faith of another person. I think there's only like a few people like Mitravan Prabhu who just read Prabhupada's books and just were like, you know what, yeah, I'm going to chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 regulative principles, and that's it. There's like a few souls like that around. But, for me it was like, I had seen all of this, and there's a level of I didn't have the intelligence to actually be able to understand the Bhagavad Gita. Also, I think most people don't. That's my theory nowadays. Also, like you read it, people are just like, "What is going on?" There's a lot in there, so people like most common people find it quite hard to grasp. For me also, until I started listening to like lectures regularly, especially from Guru Maharaj, I didn't actually understand. It was hard for me to grasp the whole philosophy together. It is there, it's just the level of intelligence that's there in me. It's not that high. It's all there, and it's very clear, but for some reason something just doesn't click, just like we had somebody read the whole Bhagavad Gita, and he's like, Krishna is a prophet, like Jesus. I was like, dude, like, yeah, you're a powerful guy. Like, there's so many, give me some. Like, dude, there's so many instances where the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, and one of the other guys who is a little more intelligent, he's like, I don't understand how he got that, because every time it's like the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Krishna is God, Krishna is the Supreme Personality. But people just somehow, they just don't get it, because obviously it comes with their own level of thing. But the level of faith that a devotee is able to display, or not just display, it convinces us of our Krishna consciousness. That's how we come into Krishna consciousness. Most of us, that we see another devotee who's very fixed and very much devoted, completely on that, trying to come to the platform of pure devotion service, and that convinces us. Someone else's faith convinces us to have faith. So it is a very important principle that we must take to try to increase our faith. How? By performing the process of pure devotional service. The more we perform the platform, the more we perform pure devotional service or try to come to that platform, the more we will see the results of devotional service in our lives, of becoming purified. And when that purification takes place, the more we'll desire to hear, the more we'll desire to perform service. And by doing such things, it will become completely fixed on that platform, not deviant. As when we talk to people, it's not that, what do you think? It's like, oh yeah, maybe it's like this. I was like, yeah, devotion service, but there's also other things. Like, no, we're very strong. No, this is the only thing. Actually, that actually is very attractive for those who are intelligent. People think, well, we can't preach exactly that we know everything, and we should be very cautious in doing that. No, we should, because we do know everything. We should be convinced that we know everything and teach people that we know everything, yes, and boldly claim it, as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did, boldly claim it and hold our stance. And when people doubt it, they say, okay, you doubt it, then defeat it. Like I was saying yesterday in the class, you doubt it, then you come. You show why you doubt. And if you cannot if you cannot convince us otherwise, then what the hell is the point of your doubt? Then you accept this philosophy completely, because it is complete. You won't find anything anywhere else. You guys are closed off. No, we're not. So faith in the process of Krishna consciousness, it has the ability to elevate us and elevate others around us. So we have to perform the process, and that primary faith that you can get in performing intense devotional service, not lax devotional service. You have to be intense with devotional service. You have to be intense. If you're not intense, your mind will carry you in so many different places. Intensity is, that's why the renounced order of life is all about intensity. Without intensity, you can't actually stay in the renounced order of life. It requires that your mind has to be engaged constantly. Otherwise, the mind engages in planning for so many things. The mind plans all the time. Mind is always planning two things. How to gratify my senses. And how to avoid trouble. Reject what I like, reject what I don't like, and accept what I like. Always planning. Accepting, rejecting according to what I want. It gets on that platform as soon as you're not intense within devotional service. But when you're intense, you have, you know what you're doing and you want to serve Krishna intensely, then all your mind is absorbed in, well, how do I serve Krishna next? What do I do? How do I improve this service? How do I understand this better? How do I go forward in this service? Then the mind is not stuck on the platform of acceptance and rejection, but it's on the platform of Krishna consciousness. So therefore, a renounced order of life is for intensity, actually. Well, devotional service in general should be like that. But generally it's seen that for those who want to stay in the renounced order of life, intensity within devotional service should be developed. And those who are grihastas also should have that, but it's seen naturally grihastha life means a little bit more relaxed life. That's what the ashram is for. It allows that. But for renunciates, it should be that they should be very intense. And that by that intensity of their devotional service, they come up in their level of faith, in their convictions, and the renounced order of life, they're meant to exhibit that. They're meant to exhibit that level of faith. They're meant to exhibit that level of conviction. And why? Because that gives conviction to others. Because actually the whole varnashram system, it depends on the renunciates quite a lot to be able to give proper knowledge. Otherwise, you get comfortable in this world and then things like you let things slide. But renunciates are meant to be very, in a sense, some chopping is there from the renunciates. No, become detached from this world. Let go. You have to renounce again. You have to renounce at the age of 50. You have to give it up. So this is proper. This is given by that level of faith in devotional service is given by that. Because when you're fully engaged in devotional service, then there's a level of experience that they have. And they give that, just like we listen to sannyasis. We listen to all devotees, of course, but you see that, like listening to someone like Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, who's, and it is Mukunda Datta Prabhu, who's another intense personality. All of them listening to these intense personalities, they allow us to develop deep faith within devotional service. So, renounced order of life or pure devotional service in general is quite intense. Why? 24 hours of hearing a day, remembering Krishna a day, it seems pretty hard for us. But we can come to that platform simply by faith, actually, by just seeing, just like you see the level of faith that, like someone like your own spiritual master is on, and he's just constantly going on, unlimitedly talking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In our own life, without that, you'll think, well, how's that possible? But seeing someone be able to do it gives us and develops that faith to be able to do it ourselves. So it's very important that one becomes submissive and inquisitive and that of service attitude in order to develop that faith. So by doing that, you can perform so many amazing things in devotional service. And that Guru Vaishnava Bhagavan Tinen Smarana Hoy Vigna Vinashana Ayasha Nija Vanchita Purana. All of the difficulties that are there in devotional service are completely put aside, and one can go forward properly in his devotional service. Simply by remembering Guru, Vaishnava and Bhagavan, to having their service attitude towards them. So this is how we make progress. This is how we get the qualification to give knowledge, to accept knowledge. Simply by submission and that of service attitude, having faith within that spiritual master. Because you have to have faith to have submission
and service. You can't, if you don't have faith in someone, then why will you serve them? Why will you listen to them? So one has to approach the Supreme Personality Godhead, the spiritual master, and the devotees with this level of faith and service attitude. And by doing that, one attains all perfection. That's all that's required, really, actually. You don't even have to be a great scholar in all of this. You just serve. Serve with proper attitude and mood and submission. Easy for the easy. Devotional service is very simple. Simple science. So, yeah, it's 8:40, so I better end there. So if there's any questions or comments, please feel free to ask.
Where does this aversion to intensity, aversion to intensity in devotional service come from?
Because of the tendency for enjoyment. Devotional service naturally regulates us away from sense enjoyment. Like reading sometimes, like at least like for a condition, like it's not like sense enjoyment. Like you're reading and it's like kind of tough to control your mind and say it's better to go and sit down with the homies and take prashadam and have a laugh, but you haven't read for the day. So pure devotional service, not that that's not devotional service, but I'm just saying that, for example, our tendency for enjoyment tends to take us away, makes us a little bit averse to like an intense service attitude. So therefore it's required to always examine ourselves again and again and again. And then you have to see how intense can you be, because the body can only handle so much. So you have to, intensity doesn't mean that you're just straight working flat out 18, 20 hours a day and only sleeping 4. That's not exactly the definition of intensity either. It means to be able to regulate yourself so that you're fully absorbed all the time in devotion service and not wasting a single moment, because understanding the importance of the human form of life and all of that. So generally it's that averseness to intensity comes from the tendency for enjoyment. Therefore we have so many different verses describing that, and Narottam Das describing that when I will, renounce this level of enjoyment, then I will be able to see Vrindavan. Then I'll be entering into Vrindavan when I no longer want to enjoy my own senses. So we can see, as Srila Prabhupada also relates many times, that in the level of, to the level our sex desire decreases, that you can see that as a symptom of advancement in devotional service also. So the tendency for enjoyment, it takes us away from intense devotional service. So therefore it's important to be under proper guidance, because they give us that faith in intense devotional service. It was unattractive to me when I came to Krishna consciousness and I saw even the person, sometimes I would live with the person that was training me up and it would just like sleep and eat and read a little bit and then go out for only 1 hour when we could have clearly gone for many hours. Initially when I came into Krishna consciousness, I was like, well, this is not really that good. It's like not enthusing, it doesn't give you just don't get much out of it. But then when you see the devotees, when I came to New York and in different places, the level of intensity is like, it's like, okay, constant engagement, constantly observing your mind in devotion. It's like, I want to do that, because it gives you that experience of devotion, that pratyaksha. You get that direct experience of devotion service by intensity. As my spiritual master said, at least the brahmacharya ashram is the pressure cooker. You gotta stay on top so you don't get burnt on the bottom. You gotta constantly pick yourself up. So we have to be intense, but then we have to regulate how that intensity goes, because you can burn yourself by that intensity. You want to be very intense, so you end up at the bottom. That's where it's hottest. So then you're going to get burnt. Then you go the other way. You can't offer that to Krishna. So he said, well, it's like a pressure cooker. Brahmacharya ashram is like a pressure cooker. Why? Because it cooks you very fast. So you go back to you offer yourself to Krishna. So it comes from the tendency to try to enjoy. Again, separate idea of there's Krishna and there's me, there's devotion service and there's my time and there's devotion service. So then when one's consciousness becomes, in that one sense, with devotion service, in that, well, there's nothing separate from devotion service, then that intensity is maintained without it feeling strainful. When devotion service feels strainful, we can understand there's a tendency to try to enjoy ourselves. As soon as that enjoy, you should analyze this. Actually, we should analyze that. When I'm feeling frustrated with the devotion service, why? Where am I trying to enjoy? Because it shouldn't be frustrating, because Krishna says, well, it's not frustrating, it's actually the source of great pleasure. It gives one great happiness. It's pratyaksha vagamam dharmam susukam kartam avvyam. One should experience that ecstasy. Well, where is that? Why am I frustrated? Well, maybe that you're meditating upon material desire. So, like I say, a practice that helps for me a lot when I'm in those states of consciousness of being frustrated and having a difficult time, is to just write it all down and then use all the shastra that you have in your mind to defeat it all. And, what is it? You use an axe to cut down wood to make the handle out of it. So it's the same. Your mind wants to torture you. Okay, all right, let's do it. Shastra is Rishikesha. Krishna is the control of the senses. Madhusudana, he's the killer of the demon. He can kill all of the different doubts in the mind. So then pull all those doubts out and then destroy it with the Krishna conscious philosophy. Important to do these things. It's hard, and then because otherwise, if you don't do them, you just let it sit in your mind. It'll just churn and churn and churn and just eat you up alive. So yeah, you have to examine those things, and it's important. Like you shouldn't just let it go. You should see, why did that come about? So you can reform that idea. The whole point of devotional service is to reform ourselves. So we need to reform ourselves by implementing different practices in our life. So yeah, that's, I guess, a long answer, but short answer, the tendency for enjoyment. Just analyze it. You see, why am I not able to be intense? Oh, okay, I have this. Now, do you need to exercise that in such an ashram? No, then you have to determine that, in which you can exercise that because one can't handle it, can't handle that level of intensity. It's better not to be burnt, better to be cooked slowly than to be burnt. So then that means, okay, entering into, if one can't handle it in that ashram which is intense, then he has to go to a place where he can handle it and then work slowly towards coming to that platform of intensity, of hearing and chanting and remembering Krishna always and being able to control the senses and all of those things. So yeah, intensity is required, but it has to be seen and guided also. Anything else? Jitagirish.
It almost seems like intensity is required, and kind of an analogy, not an analogy, I guess an analogy, a similarity when we preach in speaking strongly in Srila Prabhupada's service. Guru Maharaj says how sometimes we need to use the cutting technique. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we need to say things which are kind of extreme to people because it kind of like shocks them and kind of snaps them out of whatever illusion they're in. Mm-hmm. And similarly, I've experienced in whatever little ways I've practiced devotional service and whatever little surrender I've gone through, how those intense moments are like the pinnacle of surrender. Because like sometimes things just get so crazy and you just have to just forget, drop all your mental hang-ups and just drop everything. Okay, the service just needs to get done.
Yeah.
And that intensity is kind of required to snap you out of it sometimes.
Yeah, it's really important actually. It's like you got to get in the fire. You got to get in the fire. You got to get the fire devotional service. You got to distribute books. I tell people you got to get the 12-hour, 16-hour book distribution experience. That's the real thing. I want, like Damodar Prabhu was saying that, there was a time we cooked for 3 days straight. I was like, I want that experience. Really, I do. I really do want that experience. It's intense, and I can imagine it's crazy, but you get into this level of a samadhi, in which your consciousness, you don't have any, there's nothing mental now. You know what I mean? It's as, we've heard many times, let the mind step out of the way, and you just, especially sometimes when you're cooking, you're just in the mode of just cooking, and it's just you're cooking for Krishna, and things are just, you don't have all of this crazy nonsense coming to your head, and you're just cooking, and you're just absorbed in the service. You don't have time, instances where, this is not good in the kitchen, but you in the time where sometimes something burns you on your freaking hand, because sometimes these woks are hot, and they're so hot. If you touch it, it cuts you actually, and you don't even notice it until after you finish, like 3 hours later, and you're like, oh my God, it's like you got burnt, but the absorption and book distribution is like that also. You get absorbed in that. It's just like hours go by. You don't generally, it's like you don't feel hungry. You don't want to eat. You don't want to do anything but distribute books. And you're just saying, well, I want that experience. We should want that experience. And then there's intensity in different ways also, in which it's just difficult. And then you have to analyze. Well, this is when I should surrender. You really have to it can be hard and you're complaining, but then you have to snap yourself and go, well, this is the time to surrender actually. Again, the same thing. You have to let your mind just play it out. Go, oh, hang on a sec. This philosophy says this is when I should actually surrender instead of complaining and whining and crying about my situation. Better I try to surrender. So it's like those are some practical things. But yeah, intensity is required. You have to. It's good. It reforms you. It changes you. It builds your devotional life, builds your character, builds such a level of faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When you undergo a difficult situation, don't be shy to undergo. That's why I'll say anything. I don't give a damn. I'll say anything that, Srila Prabhupada said it, they said it. This is a fact. I'm not going to, there's no need to shy away from. Of course, we have to present it intellectually so we don't look like sentimental fools. But when we have that knowledge, it's like, well, why do I need to hide? Why do I need to be shy? Let me just present it as it is. And people, you'll find, if you do it properly, preach strongly, properly, people will be, it's like, okay, they have a soup. They may not accept it, but they're respectful. They're like, okay, these guys are not to be messed with. Okay, is there anything else? Hare Krishna.
What was it? What was this you said about 300 CE or whatever?
Yeah, some website.
What did it say?
Is it that's when the Puranas were written?
Uh-huh. So yeah, we've had students talk about this, and so obviously we understand that these texts are eternal, but even the Christians say that the Bible's eternal. As John says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So it's like saying before all time, before creation, was just God and then His Word. So then they'll say, oh, well, Christians say the same thing. So then how do we kind of argue against that? And
Well, that's true. That, even within creation, the beginning of creation, the Om, but Shastra specifically propagates knowledge you can see when you examine it that it has knowledge that is not of this world, in the sense that it presents everything very properly, with that which is understandable. And like I said, another aspect of it is that, a level of faith is required, that's what it is. And so that's how they accept it on their basis, and that's how we accept it on our basis. So if they're arguing like that, then we make the same argument to at least the Christians. They say, well, ours came first in that. And then, different people may make the point, okay, well, Christians say that too. It's like, yeah, well, that's what it is. It's like, well, we have histories and accounts of this being passed down from time immemorial. Then if you can't accept that system of knowledge, then what do you want me to do? I can't go and show you, 5,000 years ago what someone was. And I was arguing with that, what's his name? Akash. About this. It's like, you never saw it. It's like, well, there was this other kid who was saying that. It was a stupid thing. It's like, if I didn't see them, and, if I don't see, if they didn't, what is it? They didn't exist. Maybe it's this one, huh? Okay. So if I don't see them, then, they didn't exist. Some philosophy like that. Like, how can I accept it? Did they exist? We don't know if they existed, but the philosophy exists. So we accept the philosophy, but we don't accept the person. So it's stupid stuff, because obviously the person has propagated the philosophy, and it's clear within the books. So it's a level of faith. It does require that. Just like they have to believe Einstein existed, and Einstein gave that knowledge. They can't go and examine it and see it. They don't do that. They don't even try to do that. So my thing is I just hit back with the same things. Like, well, you're saying that, but you do that too. And so we do that. It's the same system of way that we get knowledge to the way that you're doing it. You go to school, you don't question, well, when did Einstein write this? Did he actually write it? You just accept it because there's like teachers that accept it and that handed it down. Similarly, we have the same system. So why are you criticizing our system? You do the same system too. So what's the problem?
It comes down to like the knowledge is perfect, and when you actually apply it, then you see like it's working. It's like
working.
A scientific process.
It comes down to that. But they may not accept that. But then on the level of at least you accepted the knowledge the same way. We do too. So why are you making a difference? Why? So what's the problem? Then I shouldn't accept your thing too. Then you go question all your science. Every class that you have, you go and find out how it came about, who did this, who did that, who said this. You spend your whole lifetime doing that. But if you just accept the knowledge, it'll work for you in your life. So Srila Prabhupada makes that point in that Ishopanishad. Don't waste time. Why are you wasting time, this and that, and experiment this and that? Just follow the process, you will see the result. Why you have to waste so much time in your life? So yeah, its level of faith is required, as the whole philosophy of faith is there. So yeah, they may say that, but I just didn't really hit them with the same thing. Well, you do that too. You're saying we do that, but you do that too. You accept it like that, we accept it like that. Same knowledge. Why do you accept it and why do you reject this? And then they generally don't have anything to say.
That's a good point you made too about how the contagious nature of like faith and like being around someone that's like that. Like I thinking about it, like when I first went to the temple in Denver, when I first found out about Krishna consciousness, there's devotees there, but they didn't really like exude that faith. Like they weren't preaching strongly. They weren't like, this is the absolute truth. They're just kind of like chilling, And I didn't really. But then when I came here, I immediately noticed the devotees were like super, like convinced. I was like, it made me think, there must be something there because they're convinced about it, so therefore there must be something there. And you also see it in churches. The way they do it is like a mega church, and they have so many people, and then they'll say, does anyone like feel like giving their life to Christ today?
Yeah.
And then some people raise their hand and like, yeah, amazing, come on down. And they come down and say, anybody else? And then now
others will raise their hand.
I want to do it too. Like that, they're doing it. It's like they become convinced. They see what someone else became convinced, even though they probably weren't going to do it. It's kind of crazy.
Even atheism on the same basis, actually. It's on the basis of faith. It doesn't make any sense. But it's all on the basis of faith. It doesn't make any sense. It's all faith. It's like, if so many people believe in atheism, so let me believe also. Is there anything from the Matajis? Yeah. And they submissively inquire from the atheist about their faith too. Actually, it's submissive, the way they inquire about atheism. And the whole thing that comes about, yeah.
That last point that Ali Krishna Prabhu was making, it's actually quite funny because especially in those mega churches, they actually like pay people, or at least these are people that like do this like every Sunday. And so like they start the ripple of the crowd, so it's quite interesting. And then also when you were making the point about how when we're trying to convince people, that the matter of the fact is if somebody isn't willing to agree, then there's actually no point. So it reminded me of Maharaj's most recent Logikai, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Logikai.
But yeah.
I talked to Rishikesh Prabhu this morning actually for an hour about that whole thing. I talked to Rishikesh Prabhu for an hour this morning about that channel.
It's really profound. But yeah, in the most recent video, Maharaj was making that point.
Yeah, that definitely. Yeah, there's so many things. The Christians have it on lockdown. There's no doubt about that. I'm definitely envious of them. I'm very envious of them. Their whole families, the women, the men. I'm so impressed by their system. The level of faith is like, whew, we ain't got that in our society. And so somehow even though we have such complete philosophy, they're able to they've just done it over generations, I guess. So it's quite strong. It's quite bewildering, actually. Their faith. You can completely destroy them, and they're just like, yeah, no problem. You see it, they're not shaking at all. Like, what the hell, I would be if somebody completely destroyed my philosophy. I would be like, oh damn, what about that? Damn. But they don't have that. Something just the faith overcome. What is it? Faith moves mountains. So, okay. Anything else? No. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yeah.
Hold on. Come on. Oh, you want to do the wax? Okay, come on. No, I'll do the incense. All right, well, I need you to come on.
With your lotus feet, because I have no other shelter. I am just taking shelter unto your lotus feet without any other means. So please accept